All right. This is my final project for my Latin 350 and advanced Latin class. So it's on poisonings in ancient Rome. I'll be reading from my laptop most of the time, and I'll also be describing my reactions and stuff. But yeah, it's basically on the Hellenicity and the poisonings in ancient Rome, the significance of them, and like how did these things happen? How did people interpret it? Specifically centering on the ideas of Livy in 331. So that's an important thing I'll touch on. But so first, I want to describe that the words like food, drug, and poison were like loosely defined in ancient Rome. So before we get into like what actually poisons were used and like why they were used, one of the big things to conquer is the facts that also I have Russian house music in the background. So what's better than that? And my German techno sweater on. So I love languages. So sorry. So yeah, they were very loosely defined, and they weren't held in compartmentalized categories like we think today, where it's like, okay, this is a food, this is a poison, this is blah, blah, blah. So, you're probably wondering, why is poisoning such a female or Hellenistic crime, or like ancient Greek, ancient Rome crime? Because a lot of people, when they think poisoning, probably in modern society, they don't think women. They probably think like anthrax and stuff like that, which I also researched too for fun, because, that's just me. But there was a lot of anthrax poisonings post 9/11, which is interesting. That's not this project. But so poisoning was often seen as a female crime because women, as keepers of the home, had access to preparation of meals and traditional herbal remedies, making the administration of a poison the domestic form of murder. So basically, like, why we're now seeing why the society thinks women do it all the time, because it's the domestic form of murder in quotations, because I don't really believe that. I'll get into my own reactions later on why I think poisoning isn't such a gender-specified crime, and for ancient Rome, not current times, because I feel like that's weird to talk about. But so because common poisons were derived from plants like aconite, hemlock, and henbane, or minerals like arsenic and lead, so like lead paint, stuff like that. But that wasn't during this time, lead paint. So, let's go up. I'm going to read some of this. So, basically, the title of this video will be Pharmapolitics. So, that was the title of this article that my teacher lovely sent to me, which I think is really fascinating, this article. I read the whole thing, but it's too much information to include in this whole video, so I'll just cover a little bit of it. So, 331 BCE, before Common Era. That was when Livy happened. The mass poisoning, as we will talk about. So, in the midst of a swelling social crisis, an unresolved enslaved woman, Ancilia, who led the state across officials to perpetrators, a crew of matronae under the leadership of Cornelia and Sergia, representatives of getting the lead for Livy's leaders. So, that's kind of saying like I'll read more and you'll understand. So, the incident had regularly been placed with other women's collective agency as a high-profile poisoning that motivated first the permanent institution of specifically task, questionado, and ultimately other stuff. I won't read all that because I put too much shit in. Oh, there's a curse word. But whatever. All right. So, it's second stage. So this is 331 BCE, pharma politics. When you think of pharma, like medicine, but I know the word in Russian for poison is yad, so it's like, I'm not talking about that. So, yeah. So, another problem this time was the enslavement in central Italy and the peninsula, as it was going under like a seismic kind of shift of ideals and Hellenistic motivations, versus like domestic women-led motivations. So, first, the transmission of pharmacological knowledge to Rome was by weak actors. They describe this in quotations because it's basically women that they thought had no knowledge base for this. So, they're building this platform off of no knowledge to be there. But it's also a very gendered thing, because it's like, why are we attributing women with only being the weak people? Like, men and women can both be weak. I don't know. I digress. So, there's a lot more weak men than women, so that's another rant. But, yeah, so they first started showing symptoms of disease, which resulted in nearly every case of that disease to death. So, somebody was like, came out, had their testimony, and they were brought to the forum, and upon the 20 matrons in whose houses they had been found were served to officials summoned to appear there, blah, blah. Two of the women, Cornelia and Sergia, both of the patrician families, argued these were wholesome remedies. So they were arguing that they were not poisons. And what they did is they urged them to drink the remedies themselves, the people accusing them. Like, well, then if you're not poison, then you drink them, prove us wrong. So they drank them, they drank the potions, and they all died of their deception, which is, like, crazy. 170 were found guilty, which is a huge mass poisoning. There had been no public inquiry info charges of poisoning in Rome, too. So, it's very interesting. So, like I was saying, it comes back to the idea of, like, these women were accused of their poisons, but they could also have been a reaction from society. This is not me defending them either. This is just me saying my own opinion. But my reaction is, it's like the Salem witch trials. Like, if we look at that, for example, I know it's a completely different era and different area of land, but these women were captured and accused of these crimes, and they probably did nothing of the sort. And they were executed. So, but once again, women hold the lower power than men and other stuff of men. So, like, it's interesting how those fields combat and, like, coerce each other. Of, like, this is a very big power dynamic that we see. Like, in Procalio with Cicero and the guy, Calio, who wanted to poison, or we don't know what it was in the box. It could have been poison, it could have been a love potion. We'll never know. But the fact that with men, it's like, we'll defend the men, but if it's a woman doing that, they're immediately guilty. So I think that's a big gender role to absorb and for you guys to understand. Oh, I like the song. I was trying to think what it was. So in ancient Rome, poisoning was notoriously associated with women, as it said multiple times. Driven by both sensationalized historical accounts and real instances of women using poison for various motives. So, like, escaping marriages or political ambition, like, for a political motive. Also, just escaping their domestic lives. So they thought, like, if I do something with poison, then my life will change drastically, and so will my partner's. I'll get out of this, and, like, nobody will have evidence. So, it's a weird stereotype, like, for me to argue on, like, poisons and why these women did such things. But from a more of my aspect of, like, psychology, understanding things, like, you can fake a reaction pretty good. People can do that. So if you take a poison and you just want to be out of it, then you can fake that pretty easily. Like, you fake the effects of it. But so there are 2 more accounts of poison. So Locusta, if I said that wrong, please correct me. Perhaps the most infamous professional poisoner in Rome was a woman origin of Gaelic in the 1st century AD. So this is a couple hundred years after that. She was hired by somebody to murder her husband with a poisoned mushroom. So she was ordered to poison her rival, and she was ultimately executed after the death of Nero the Emperor. So, like, she didn't really get away with that. She was executed. Then also, I can't say this one. Agrippina the Younger? Nero's mother, Agrippina, was a powerful and ruthless woman who allegedly used poison to secure her son's ascent to the throne. First by poisoning Claudius and possibly attempting to poison others. She herself was even later murdered by Nero's guards. So, it's interesting what these people will use to get their position and their power. And for women, they're saying it's these domestic affairs of, like, more passive forms of poisoning instead of when you think of men and, like, fighting, and another stereotype with men, because not to just say, like, that just women have stereotypes, because men have stereotypes too. I mean, regardless of your gender, it's kind of like you're implied all these stereotypes at some point in your life. So, that was it. Yeah, so back to Livy. I hope I'm saying that right. I feel like it's one of those Latin words that I just don't get. So, I'm probably not saying it right. But if I am not, please correct me. Dr. Amoroso. Professor Amoroso. So, at this time in Rome, during this 331 BCE, was the seismic shifts that I kind of talked about. So, this culture and this landscape was vastly shifting. This time from like enslavement to women in the household and matronly affairs, and kind of just everything was changing really fast. So I feel like this was like society's effort, rather internal or external, to kind of grapple on, hold on, and white knuckle it. Of like, hold on, this is happening too fast. So we got to accuse people of something to slow it down, because these women are getting more power than we thought they would, and they're doing the poisonings. They're gonna say, "Right, we're doing the poisonings." So, my news is running. I just think it's interesting when you look at the gendered kind of classification, because as we all know from my other video with genital mutilation, mic drop right here, is that, or no, not mic drop. What's it called when like you insert video here? I can pull it up right here. I can't edit that, so it won't be there. Just pretend it's there. So it can help itself. I think it's just interesting because it is so gendered. Like, we live in this concept right now that, granted, our society obviously is much different than ancient Rome. I will say that, but things are still gendered, but not as much as during this time, where it was like, you're a woman, then you must do this. You must you probably live by these rules. So it's vastly different than today, but I feel like it's interesting for a comparison of when we look at poisonings, of like, what is poisonings now and what are poisonings back in ancient Rome? Like, were they always these matronly affairs, and now why is it shifting to like ricin or anthrax? Like, that I coincidentally started studying recently anthrax because I was telling my teacher a TikTok of somebody who got arrested. They had a bag of baking soda and baking powder, and they were at a party in New York City, and they were just going like this with it, and it like all flew out, and they were shaking up people, and these girls had like baking powder over them, and somebody said it was anthrax, and like the midst of it, which is like a highly deadly substance if you touch it. So he, like, the hysteria, he went to jail. It wasn't anthrax, but you can't mess with that stuff. So, but again, that was a man doing it. So if that was a woman, I feel like she'd be treated much more harshly, publicly and socially, than this guy who was like, it was a joke, so he could get away with it. Yes, he spent some time in prison, but he got away with it at the end, and people thought it was funny. It's on freaking TikTok, for God's sakes. It's not. If a woman, I feel like it'd be more shameful. Like, oh, she's stupid, or oh my God, that's so stupid, why would she do that? Where the guy, it's like, oh, he's just doing it for attention. Which is a very dismissive thought. But my other motive with this project is, with poisonings, what's the ulterior motive here? Because sometimes love potions, as I learned in my Latin class with Procalio, like, they are not poisons, but people who don't know what they are, like a weird substance in a bottle, like, you're gonna assume it's not good for you, probably. Like, if you go to a bar and somebody puts something in your drink, you're not going to drink it, or it's going to be something bad's happen. So, I don't know. I feel like this could be expanded to, like, future implications on my next course, which is Ancient Magic with Professor Amoroso, which is next semester. I'm excited for that. But I know some of this material will carry over. But if you made it this far, thanks for listening. And any questions, obviously feel free to comment or DM me if you have me on Instagram. Ryan Idiot Boy is the username, one word. So, yeah, thanks so much. And also, I wanted to say that, yeah.